Since the dawn of time, our drive for a better life now draws the map of our future. And Sofia Tech Park is the home of innovation. Business, science, and education feel at home. The laboratory complex of the park is the cutting edge of progress. Total of 11 high-tech laboratory units led by luminaries of Bulgarian science. Innovation is the focus of all the startup companies in the business incubator. Sofia Tech Park is home to dozens of young Bulgarian enterprises with a high-tech profile. Sofia Tech Park is the home of innovation.
Good day, everybody. I'm Christina Eskenazi, and today I will be your lovely host at the meeting of Club connected with biotech and life sciences. These meetings are part of the monthly series meeting in a collaboration between Health and Life Sciences Cluster and Sofia Tech Park. The aim of our monthly meetings is to stimulate, validate, and promote technological progress in life sciences sector, as well to connect the audience with the scientists, experts, investors, and other specialists in our field. Today's edition is special as our guest and topic of discussion is. I will start with sharing a recent interesting news coming from our ecosystem. In the next part of our event, we will meet our special guest, Mr. Alper Selen, who will make introduction on venture-built models. Mr. Selen is the founder of Enhance Venture, the venture studio specializing in online vertical market in the Middle East, North America, Pakistan, and Turkey. He has advised multiple governments on their innovation and startup ecosystems strategy, as well as the higher education. Our next guest and moderator of the discussion panel is Mr. Martin Shiderov. Mr. Shiderov was living and working in UK since 2007. He leads the healthcare and life sciences sector for the investment services at Ernst & Young in London. As part of his role, he worked closely with the British government to attract foreign direct investment, innovation, and capital to the UK life sciences ecosystem. For us, it's a privilege to have Mr. Martin Shiderov as a partner and supporter of our innovative ecosystem that show that in a collaboration with our brilliant representative of the Bulgarian diaspora, we can achieve a better and successful result. The next guest that will joining to our studio is Mr. Vladimir Danayil, who is the Executive Director and member of the Managing Board of the Fund of the Funds. He will share with us more about the role of the Fund of the Funds connected to investment in science and innovation. Mr. Danayil is well known as our ecosystem partner and supporter. We are expecting a brief introduction also from Mr. Martin Danovsky, who is the chairman of the State Agency of Research and Innovation. I hope that he will manage to join us today also. And of course, we will meet Mr. Angel Hadziev, who is the fund manager in Capital Investment Fund next to Bulgarian Bank of Development. Do not forget to join us with a question and comments. We will be more than happy for your feedback and suggestion for our next events. As I promised you, I will make a brief review over our activities connected to the topic, hoping that today's event will provide answers and possible solutions to developing the Bulgarian life science ecosystem. At the beginning of this year, Health and Life Science Cluster Bulgaria, together with Sofia Municipality and Sofia Tech Park, signed a memorandum of collaboration which marked the beginning of the establishment of the first biocenter of its kind in Bulgaria. At this stage, as a result of series of meetings, we have already met the support to our projects from Maria Gabriel, from Armchan, the Bulgarian Business Leader Forums, different stakeholders from European Union and worldwide, and of course organizations which are dedicated to our life sciences, such as Oxentia, which is the innovative company of Oxford, Eurobio, which is the largest European, most influential biotech industry organization, CRB, Global Network Edge Alliance, Digital Innovation Hubs Net, among the others. we have continued with the media activities by attracting trending topics for Southeastern Europe as a strategic media partner, which support us in building our positive international image and provide us opportunity to share the good stories coming from our ecosystem. I want to say hi to Kauyan Ratchet, who is the ambassador of the cluster in Austria region, but he's also a co-founder of Artificial Intelligence Cluster Bulgaria, our strong partner, of course, CEO of Bangavi's company, and recently become the managing partner of Trending Topics Southeastern Europe. Hi, Kauyan. Are you here
Hello.
with us? Great to see you. Can you please share more with our audience for what to expect from our future collaboration?
From the collaboration, there are different points of or different levels. On the one hand side, in my opinion, it's very important to have a mapping of the life science and biotech industry in Bulgaria, which is important for internal reasons, for ourselves, for internal national stakeholders, but even more important also for external stakeholders outside the country who can have an overview of the opportunities, of the innovation, and of the organizations who are involved. Currently, in the AI cluster, we are working on the AI report, and after that, we will prepare the biotech and life science report, which we can expect in a good case before the summer. In my opinion, it's very important to show success stories, to publish success stories from Bulgaria and from the region, to show the innovation.
For disturbing, we will go back to you very recent, but I see that Mr. Martin Danovsky managed to join us. Hi, Mr. Danovsky. Thank you that you accepting our invitation. I hope that very briefly you can share more with us about what are the strategic vision and focus of the agency on innovation and research in Bulgaria for the new program period.
Hi, Christina. Hello to everybody. Sorry that you've interrupted Kauyan. Sorry, I didn't know. I just joined. Sorry for my late coming. Yeah, I've been pretty interested to get part of this event because I've seen that the conversation actually is going for the future, but not for a kind of a very far future from now on, but to very distant one, where all maybe probably the players in this conversation and the new players and the new advisors may help to contribute to the Bulgarian development of the new Bulgarian RNI ecosystem. So that's why I see a great importance of such a conversation, and I'm happy to be a small part of it. The perspective, as we might be discussing before, in fact, is to putting a more systematic approach of building the new R&I ecosystem in Bulgaria. So simple to say, and probably one of the quite complicated tasks that needs an involvement of many players, many resources, and many and different know-how that we obviously we are not sure that we are having in the full size today. In fact, why we need such a new ecosystem to build is because it's been recently, last 2 years at least, recognized that there will be any important leap of Bulgarian economy and the Bulgarian environment in terms of economic development without research and innovation. This is probably not any completely new for many markets and for many economies, but for us it's obvious a need. Well, probably you've been discussing in the time about the different challenges we faced. I will not go through because probably you're facing them every day because they are part of our and your life of entrepreneurs, innovators in the sectors. But they'll be important just for the sake of the conversation to mention that the fragmentation of the public science and private science based is one among of them. The science and business linkage and the models of collaboration is also on the, it's leading for the moment, unfortunately, to the loss of the commercialization opportunities. That's for sure. And lagging behind almost half of the European countries, lagging behind in parameters of the research and innovation of the digitalization scoreboards is something that we are not feeling comfortable with. That's why we needed this strategic approach, the approach that we decide to take in somehow to put really our finger and our arms to address this holy triangle of education, science, and business, and to address it from the perspective also of the responsibility of the public stakeholder, of the public player inside, which is, we believe, quite important. Which way we decide to do this? Basically, we decide to put really some systematic approach and to put the ecosystem model at the very corner, trying and starting to try to put the different stakeholders, group of stakeholders in the market on the same table. So saying that, we've been starting almost 1 year ago to define a reform that must be undertaken in Bulgaria in terms to build this new R&I ecosystem. The couple of the components of this reform I would outline without to go into detail for that conversation, but it's including first the new way how the public stakeholder will approach and address the needs and the gaps in this ecosystem, but also helping and needs at the beginning to be helpful of identifying with all other players the most proper model for the Bulgaria of this R&I ecosystem. So if the perspective is 5 + 5 means 10 years from now on, we should not it should not be very easy just to take some steps. We have to put them in a proper perspective. That's why we decide to build a new public body, which is going to be main responsible body and the main integrator of all public policies in this future ecosystem. This is quite important. It's not because the Bulgaria doesn't have any approach to those policies, like policy for innovation, policy for research, policy for digitalization, but because these policies has to be put in together. So it's a one holistic approach to these areas that has to be undertaken and then built by instruments, capacity, and different building blocks in this system. So one of the point in this reform is to change the approach of the public stakeholder to the overall system. The second one is to update the legislation about R&I, which is unfortunately still underdeveloped. We have some law. We have a law for the development of the research in Bulgaria, but we doesn't have a lot in the legislation about the innovation, about the technology transfer, about all the related issues with the IP. Otherwise, we have a law of IP, but all the related issues with this ecosystem. So there is things to be done here in this, let's say, the second pillar of this reform. the third pillar of those efforts should be building really contemporary capacity of the research and innovation ecosystem, and the capacity which is focused on the interaction with the business, not the capacity by himself. So trying to put some, if I may figure out what I have in mind, it's great that we have a supercomputer, by the way, third one in Bulgaria, one of the most powered 8 or 12 in the Europe, but the public infrastructure. But if we doesn't have a model for collaborating, for putting, let's say, proper loading, for having the proper task, and to load it in the full size with the expected results, for the expected results, it will be useless. And many other examples. The research infrastructure has to have, in our opinion, has to have a couple of different approaches in different segments of this research infrastructure. A bigger part of it is within the Bulgarian Academy of Science and the agricultural institutes. Then the other part is within the higher education, within the universities, and different players in this infrastructure system has a different type of problems that we have to address. And at the end, but should be probably at the beginning, the fourth pillar of that reform should be the technology transfer itself, and the way to the commercializing the result of the research, with, of course, with the active role, and more or less with the pooling role of the industry, which means we have to build the supply-demand model, which is more actual and more powerful, more vital than we have today. That's the most shortage outline of the efforts that we are undertaking for the moment. Of course, we are trying to explain, and we believe that the Bulgaria is now in quite important momentum for undertaking such an efforts. First of all, we have an understanding what should be changed, and the question is how, when, and to do it the most proper way. But also we have on the pipeline a couple of financial resources coming from the ESIF funds, coming from the Recovery and Resilience Facility, partially coming from in the Green Deal, which also have a lot of resources inside allocated for the innovation and research. And we have a quite proper efforts and financial engineering that is needed to support such a policies. Otherwise, we will be just a policy thinker, policy talker, and which is, we don't believe that we have to, that's in our favor at that moment. So that's the overall picture. I don't know how you are projecting to be this discussion. Now I will be able, and I will be happy to answer some questions.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Danovsky. Indeed, it's a very important moment right now in front of the Bulgaria. We are working over building those strong regional innovative ecosystem with all the stakeholders inside, including the SMEs, the cluster, the academia, the government, the fund, the investors. So I hope today's meeting we will answering how exactly to achieve this. You mentioned very important moment when it comes to resources. Yes, in Bulgaria we believe and we know that we have quite enough resources and needed, to become the next innovation destination when it comes to life science, artificial intelligence, health, etc. I want to back to Kao-Yan. He started to share with us about our common projects with the trending topics and Vangavis according to those needed mapping, because we all know that if we have enough data, we can analyze and of course we can take advantage on it. Without the data, we can't do much things. So Kao-Yan, back to you.
Yes, thank you. As I said, the data and the mapping are essential for internal reasons, but also for external stakeholders to have a clear picture of the Bulgarian ecosystem. In German, there is a saying that says it takes a whole village to raise a child. And I've always been a big supporter of the ecosystem approach of collaboration, of support, and of trust, which are essential elements of an ecosystem approach and of a cross-industry approach. And I've always worked for connecting different ecosystems, may it be like Bulgaria and Austria, may it be AI, biotech, or others. So we'll for sure follow this open innovation, collaborative ecosystem approach in order to map the ecosystems, in order to build ventures which need a lot of effort from all sides, and in order to bring Bulgaria to the next level.
Great. And last question for you. Could you please share with us, do you have some questions to our guest, or do you have opinions, some comment that we can implement into the topic of venture build models? Are they possible to happen in Bulgaria also?
Yeah, maybe, regarding the venture build model, I found out that different people understand it in a different way, and I would love to hear the opinions of the experts, how they actually see it. I saw that there is a need of a pipeline of ventures, and the question is, should the pipeline be scouted or should it be built? In my opinion, as the name says, the venture build model is a model to build ventures. So it's important to focus on the transfer of science to business, from academia to the market, with the help of media, with the help of supporters, with the help of the government and or other stakeholders. And I think it's a first important step. One of the supporters of venture build are, in my opinion, accelerators, which educate scientists, which educate academia and experts how to make this transfer from their research to the market, how to bring and market products. And we know that at least in Europe there is a need for this so-called science-based innovation, and I would love to hear more on that, and how we can approach the science-based innovation to bring more science-based products to the public, to the market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will ask our guest in studio of all this question. Being Bulgarian provides a unique opportunity to create a model based on an ecosystem that is following cross-industry, cross-technology, and cross-regional approach. In a collaboration with Artificial Intelligence Cluster Bulgaria, we had managed to propose a moonshot project to European AI Forum that brings better solution for the life sciences and health. Yes, it's coming from Bulgaria, and we are very proud that we can opening this discussion on a European level about how to create a better and stronger bridge between life sciences, health, and artificial intelligence. I hope that no one is surprised that how many companies in our sector increase their innovative and investment potential by implementing solutions from machine self-learning, NLP, big data. For example, imagine beneficial on activities connected with the development of European health data space that can resolve ownership of health data, IP issues, AI-ready data for algorithm development. I promise that we will keep you in touch with more updates according to this project. We believe that from small Bulgaria, we can contribute to the European Union to increase this innovation capacity and deliver more solutions for the life sciences and health. But the big question of today is how to make the new coming biocenter Bulgaria successful, and how to position Bulgaria as an R&I center in Eastern Europe. Often when we speak with the different stakeholders from European Union, a huge international European organization similar and connected to life science and biotech, they advise us several things. The first thing is, and of course the major one is, think big, and of course positive. The next thing that they advise us to take the good know-how and implement it into our strategies, to find experienced partners, to review the existing resources and potential in our country, to do it scalable and sustainable action plan for the next 3 to 5 years, and of course to make discussion with the expert in your country and abroad that can support the idea. I believe that today's event is one step to going and to achieve this goal. We review different models worldwide and find solution and best example coming from UK. The huge economic crisis in 2009 pushed the government and the life sciences ecosystem to think of adoption of a new model called venture build model. I'm sure that our guests will going deeper into the topic of the role of the venture building in the ecosystem development and economic growth, and I hope that we will find a way how exactly we can implement it in Bulgaria by taking the best know-how. Life sciences startups have always been on a mission to improve the human health through innovation. The global impact of COVID-19 crisis have made this important more clear than ever. For startup leaders looking toward the future, it's important to understand how that they can find some funds and investment, and how can they contribute and benefit from the local ecosystem. In our studio with me is Dimitar Dimitrov. He's the other chairman of Health and Life Science Cluster. His role today is not only to stop me if I speak too much, I hope, but also he's representative of the Bulgarian innovative company, SMEs. They're facing a lot of problems connected with this ecosystem because, unfortunately, not only Bulgaria, but all the region of Southeastern Europe and even Western Balkan included, we are suffering of the expertise and dedicated fund which understanding and supporting deep technology innovation. And they are the key, as we all know. So today, Dimitar is here. I hope that he will join through the discussion part of the event, to sharing, of course, what are the need of the companies in order to stay here. Because usually, probably we all know that if the venture fund from abroad invest some money in a prospective innovative company, they want this company in their backyard. This means that every year we lose a lot of IP, smart people. So-called brain drain is existing right now just because those companies are not part, they are not feeling part of the ecosystem. And I believe that those challenges that Martin Danovsky pointed a little bit before a few minutes, it could be a possible solution. How we can resolve this situation? I hope that during the session we will find some answering, and because I believe that everybody expecting the second part of our event connected with presentation. I want to give a stage to Mr. Alper Selen to share with us the best know-how coming from the venture build models. Hi, Alper.
Hi, Christina.
Hi.
Hi, Martin. Thanks for having me.
Here with you.
Thank you.
If it's okay with you, I'd like to start. Can I have a bit of a time check on how much time I have? So I'll pace myself. There's a lot to this. So.
Yeah, you are our key guest. We are hoping to attract you as a long-term partner. So please feel comfortable with your time and presentation, because we're really eager to understand more about the models and what make them so successful worldwide.
Sounds great. Let me share my screen and get started. Please let me know if I'm going.
Yes, we see your share screen.
Please let me know. First of all, thanks for having me. And I am going to try my best to upload our research from the last 4 years in the venture builder startup studio space. And to do that, let me just divide the discussion into 3 pieces. First, let me build a bit of credibility and tell you about who we are and why we're doing this research, and why do we collect all this information about the venture builder model. And then go into building some context. What is venture building? What are the numbers? Who's doing this? How many venture builders are out there? And finally, talk about why venture building. And specifically, I even have a few slides on why, for an ecosystem, I'm looking outside into Bulgaria, but for an ecosystem like Bulgaria, why venture building may be valuable. So those are the 3 pieces. To get started, I like to think of myself as someone that's kind of in the intersection of what Mr. Martin mentioned, the triangle between science, education, and business. I started my career as an engineer in deep tech. I have a master's in electromagnetics, stuff that I really had a really hard time explaining to people in gatherings and parties. I worked in deep tech for a NASA subcontractor in the US, then IBM, and switched then to a bit the business side of technology for a software company called Ansys. From there, I got an MBA from MIT, where I really stayed in this junction of technology and business at the Sloan School. During that time, I worked at Nokia in the high-flying days of Nokia in corporate strategy. And then after the MBA, went to McKinsey and really, started going into professional problem solving and getting exposed to many different industries, always with a hint of technology in them. Then about 12 years ago, I moved to the Middle East. Dubai is my home. We operate across the region in actually 9 countries. And once I moved to the Middle East, I was continuing my consulting in my own firm, mostly serving governments and telecom operators. And 5 years ago, we built Enhance, which is a venture builder. And right now, today, I am the operator of this venture builder. It's arguably the first venture builder in our region, in the MENAPT region. That's Middle East, North Africa, Pakistan, Turkey region. Our home is Dubai here in UAE and in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, but we are live in 9 countries. Besides that, I am an angel investor. I sit on the board of Global Startup Studio Network, which is the global collective of venture builders, startup studios. I sit on the board of that. I'm a founding member and board member. And I'm a very active mentor to a lot of startups through Techstars and Startup Bootcamp accelerators. That's a bit about me. This is what Enhance is. Enhance is a venture builder. As I said, we're in MENAPT markets. Right now, we're in 8 countries. We have a kitchen in the 9th country where we do our tech development. And we're going to be continuing to the rest of the region. And we build, on one side of our business, we build vertical marketplaces. In my past, I built, in my 12-year tenure here, I built the largest food delivery business. I was founder of the largest food delivery business in the region. We exited that some more than 5 years ago now to Delivery Hero of Germany. I also built other vertical marketplaces. And right now under Enhance, all we do is under Enhance, we build marketplaces. We operate the region's largest online gifting platform, for example, across those 8 countries. We have a fintech marketplace business called Clever. We have region's first conscious marketplace called Bluterra, where we sell more conscious products. We're launching a health and personal care marketplace in Saudi, starting with Saudi. And we have another home diagnostic marketplace coming up a bit later this quarter. So that's what we do on one side of the business. On the other side of the business, we advise corporations and governments on how to apply the venture builder. Because in the past, when I was at McKinsey or in my own consulting firm, we would advise on a broader spectrum of innovation. But right now, as practitioners and enthusiasts of the venture builder model, we apply our venture building know-how to innovation, be it in the corporate context, if a corporation is trying to inject innovation, like beyond the horizon for their strategy, or for an ecosystem such as the one here in UAE, or we've done work in Azerbaijan, Finland, etc., to first assess what the venture builders can do to inject usually some speed into an early stage ecosystem, and then think about how to activate the first few ones. That's the other work that we do. In doing this, we generate quite a bit of know-how. Please go to Enhance website and feel free to download our white paper. Martin can also maybe share with the audience as well. The website is enhance.online. This is arguably the most widely shared and used white paper on startup studios or venture builders, interchangeably used out there. We have a playbook that's proprietary of how we build our ventures. We call it the 51. It's 51 steps of venture building. I'll go a bit more deep into that. And we're also part of, as GSSN, the Global Startup Studio Network, the collective of studios. We publish together with them their white papers, etc. We have a Silicon Valley partner called Silicon Foundry. They're one of the best known innovation consultancies in the world. They're effectively our Silicon Valley office, where we see still a lot of know-how that we can tap into. And we are their regional office, if you will, over here. And we do work with them and create know-how with them as well. Some of the things that we've done, this is the public things that we can discuss. We're very active in GSSN, the Global Startup Studio Network. It's a great source if you want to look at more information and learn more about startup studios or venture builders. Please feel free to go to their website and learn more. gssn.co is the website. We are founding members, and we sit on the advisory board of that organization and publish together with them. You can see some of our videos and some of our webinars and their recordings on their website as well. We work with Babson College, and it's interesting. They're looking at applying the studio model to education. So we have, as practitioners, we're telling them our playbook, chapters of our playbook to enable them to do that. And finally, I think it's quite relevant because we're talking about health tech, biotech quite a bit in this conversation. We are on the advisory board of Hashed Health, which is a healthcare studio in the US. We help them switch to a studio model on their advisory board, and that's what we've done. So that's a bit about us as Enhance and myself as Alper. I want to now switch gears and talk a bit about this context, what's happening, because for the last 4 years, so Enhance is 5 years old, and we didn't build Enhance as a copy of something. Arguably the most famous venture builder or startup studio in the world is Rocket Internet. Like, our goal was not to become the Rocket Internet of Middle East or XYZ of Middle East and MENAPT region. We were trying to solve a very specific problem. We were finding that building ventures, startups here in our region was not as easy as it would be, let's say, in Silicon Valley or New York or London. And we were trying to find innovations on the model of building ventures that would take away some of that friction and make it easier. So we came up with we first called it a holding company. And luckily, we had access to a lot of people from different, more advanced ecosystems, and we rapidly learned from them. My partner, who's an ex-VC, had invested in Rocket Internet businesses, so he had some know-how from Rocket's model as well. And we came up with, what is now a venture builder, but it came out of necessity. and it follows a global trend that is happening. If you look at, on the x-axis here, financial capital invested into a given venture, and in the y-axis, human capital, amount of hours invested from experts, the investors, into a human venture. This is kind of the mapping that that we see. In the bottom left corner, there are angel investors. They would invest, 10, 20, 100, maybe a couple $100,000 into a venture, and they would invest in a given monthly, maybe hours of time, right? They're super busy people. They are angels, and when they try to invest some time and money, they want to count, but they cannot be very actively involved in the business. Then there are accelerators. For a given 3-month stint, the likes of Y Combinator, Techstars, 500 Startups, Startup Bootcamp, etc., inject much more time in those 3 months, right? But they still stay in that around $100,000 kind of investment level. Then, of course, to the right is the big investors, the VC category, that invest considerably more, often millions of dollars into a venture, but they are doing a lot of pipeline management and portfolio management, where given a relatively small team of venture capitalists in a firm, they don't have that much time to invest into any given one venture. Maybe hours, single-digit hours, or tens of hours a month in a given venture is typical, right? Then there are the venture builders. They don't maybe invest as much as the VCs would, but they invest arguably higher than the average angel investor or the accelerator, but they invest much more in time, right? And if you look at the trends around the world, accelerators, even angel investors, I would argue, venture capitalists, everybody's trying to say, everybody comes and says, building ventures is difficult. It takes, let's invest more money. The rounds are getting larger, right? And in every ecosystem, what was once Series A now becomes seed, what was Series B becomes Series A, etc. But also, let's build infrastructure. If you go to Accel, for example, Accel, as a top brand in venture capital, has a platform that it lends to its ventures in the form of like having an in-house growth hacker or an in-house CTO that they would lend to go up this human capital investment to their ventures and help those ventures, chance of success. We as venture builders are naturally there. We do tech, we do marketing, we have large organizations that come in and co-build with founders, right? So this is a trend that we're seeing, and that's why there's an explosive growth in venture builders in the world. It's because it is the natural place that, if you believe these trends that people are trying to invest more time and money, it's the natural place that venture builders operate anyway, right? So what do venture builders do? Effectively, we try to parallel process. Instead of doing serial entrepreneurship that a typical entrepreneur would do, I have been one, you would build one venture, you would exit it, or you would fail, then build the next one, etc. Where the venture builder or startup studio comes in and says is, by using similar processes and resources like technology, like database, like business networks and for business development, etc., for infrastructure, that I have an office in Riyadh and I have an office in Dubai, I have an office in Cairo. It is just faster and easier, lower cost for me to, build not only one venture but multiple ventures in parallel, right? That's what venture building is, and it is truly building. To the comment that was, mentioned before me, this is not supporting, right? There's a major difference between us and accelerators. Accelerators would come in and provide very valuable support. In often cases, a good accelerator provides exceptional support. That's why I'm part of Techstars, right, as a mentor. But it would do it only 3 months, right? And now they're trying to find ways of extending that 3 months so that once a cohort is over, they can continue to support ventures. But really, it's concentrated on 3 months, right, and limited money. Whereas where we would come in, we would say, we're going to go from, from the very early, the idea of a business, all the way to, taking out quite a bit of the risk and raising money externally. We're going to be there, your partner, and co-build with you. And every venture builder, this is our version. We call it the 51. We have 51 steps. of venture building, and I'll go a bit more into that in the next slide. Every venture builder has a playbook, right? That they do this because you need to be able to reuse certain processes across ventures to bring in the efficiency of building that venture and increase that chance of success, right? What does that process look like? This is a new asset class, venture builders, and there's a bit differences in the terminology that's used, but more or less what you will see is every venture builder out there is going through something like this. They first go and ideate, sometimes internally, sometimes with potential co-founders that will come in and build a business with them. But they first ideate. From when they think that they have a good idea that matches their strategy, then they go and validate that idea before they would spend a lot of time and money into building it. And this is where a lot of growth hacking comes into play. You want to essentially, most studios, most venture builders are finding ways of rapidly and at low cost test certain key assumptions, such as, is this product or service really applicable to that group of customers? Or another one would be, okay, those customers want this service. Are they willing to pay this much for the service, right? So that's kind of the next second step that studios would do. Once the validation step would be passed, you would go into creation step where you would actually go build the venture and start generating early revenues. Then some venture builders try to immediately spin off that venture. Our model actually calls for spinning in and doing growth in our venture builder. It's our take on it, and some others, do the same thing as well. We call that step spin in. Others call it growth, and then we spin out at scale up stage. And at that scale up stage, we raise money externally. That's our model. What is critical is this word, right? Shared resources and culture, right? Sharing. What we're essentially promoting is that when a venture is built within a venture builder, it in average has a higher chance of success because it shares resources like in marketing, know-how, databases, etc., technology, actual code base can be shared from one venture to another. Fundraising, that capability, know-how, networks, etc., can be shared, and the culture that can be shared. Of course, there's also this business infrastructure, strategy, HR, knowing where to get best, resources as talent, etc., that can also be shared, right? So that is the secret sauce. And whenever we talk to budding new studios, new venture builders, we always talk about this word. We say, what are you going to be sharing among your ventures that is going to give you a competitive advantage, almost like an arbitrage opportunity versus a VC that is investing piecewise into venture by venture, where that sharing just doesn't naturally happen. Okay, so that's a bit how the venture studio model works. Again, the model has venture studio, venture builder, startup studio, startup factory. These are interchangeably used out there, right? It causes a bit of confusion. We are trying to get rid of some of this confusion. I think startup studio is becoming quite popular, and venture building as a verb is becoming popular, right? And how has this played out in the history? If we look at a bit the history of these venture builders, it's really the originator, I think, now it's taken for granted, is the Idea Lab. It started in 1996. March was the 25th anniversary of venture building, because it was the 25th year anniversary of Idea Lab. And it was relatively slow to start, right? Not much happened in that first initial 10 years. Of course, Idea Lab was very successful early on. Then the dot-com bust came, and I think kind of slowed down the movement a bit. And then, of course, enters, in 2007, Rocket Internet. BetaWorks was a great success story in New York City. It helped actually build some of the New York's early ecosystem. In 2007, New York was not known as the haven of, entrepreneurship is today. They came around. And then in the 2010s, many newcomers start coming into play. And now I'll show in the next slide, there's an incredible proliferation of venture builders around the world. But it's not that only these venture builders launched. and that they raised incredible amount of funding. I think just these maybe around, there are about 20 or studios in these bubbles. About $5 billion is raised by these studios. It's considerable amount of funding, but a lot of unicorns and very successful startups came out of them as well. Some of these you would know. What you use as Google Photos today is Picasa, which was an Idea Lab business. Jiffy, which you may know and use for sending jokes back and forth, is a BetaWorks creation. Zalando, a huge player in fashion e-commerce, is a Rocket Internet, right? Dollar Shave Club, a great success story that actually was a very quick unicorn to exit. It comes from science, and the list goes on, right? And there's, I think, more examples that I'll share in a second in another slide as well. And the growth is staggering. I'm proud to say that I think before we came into the picture and started doing this research, nobody had counted how many studios there are out there. And we would do some research, read some blog posts that were really helpful. And somebody was saying, hey, there's like 100 studios. And they would say, well, it's approaching 100, we're not really sure, right? So on a crazy night, I decided that our organization should start counting because nobody else was doing it at the time. And we started counting, and today we hold, I guess, the unofficial, official roster of studios and studio-like structures in the world. And the latest count we just updated, yesterday, is 694. So there are actually now active about 700 studios around the world. What is very surprising, and needs to be mentioned, is that more than half of these, about 60%, are launched in the last 5 years, right? This is an accelerating movement. You can see kind of this exponential growth happening. We're going to finish this year but easily over 800 studios. And please also note that our research is not as strong in China and Korea and Japan, where we think that there are a lot of studios and studio-like structures, because a lot of the data is not available readily in English. They use their local languages. So the number is probably even higher than this. The other thing, since I'm talking to a European audience here, the other thing that's very interesting is in this, Europe has caught up and actually even passed US, right? So Europe actually has now, according to our count, more studios and studio-like structures, I should say, venture builders, than the US, right? And we have a hypothesis why that is, and we'll come to that, in a second. But in general, if I just at a very high level, the model is about helping studios, and the studio model is about helping ventures, right, and reduce their risk and grow them faster and cheaper. Where it is more difficult to launch a venture and succeed, the model disproportionately has a more positive effect, right? If you're an incredible founder, third-time founder in Silicon Valley, arguably you don't need a studio to help you succeed on the fourth venture. But if you are in an early stage ecosystem like ours, if you're in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Riyadh, in Cairo, maybe I would argue in Sofia, right, where it is more difficult to build a venture and scale it, the studio model applies even more stronger. And that's why we think that European colleagues building venture studios are buying into the idea even more than the American colleagues are. Some more examples. I mentioned science. Dollar Shave Club is a great success story. It was acquired by Unilever for $1 billion after rapidly taking about 15% share in men's shaving in the US market. It was a really insane growth story. Grove Collaborative is another amazing success story from science. We actually have a business similar to Grove. It's conscious commerce, essentially. Kara from Juxtapose is a New York-based studio. Just did a great exit of one of their personalized vitamin pack business called Care to Bayer. Atomic, arguably one of the best studios out there, very famous studio in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, recently took their HIMSS business public through a SPAC. And eFounders Arguably the most successful European studio based out of Paris and Brussels specializes in SaaS, SME SaaS, and has a combined portfolio value over $1 billion. And it's not only individual studios that are interesting, but also large corporations are looking at the studio model as well. BCG has its own studio. Ernst & Young has bought a German studio back in 2017, some 3 years ago. Deloitte has done the same thing again in Germany. Something happened in like 3 years ago in Germany where Ernst & Young and Deloitte both went in and acquired studios in Germany. Mars, which is a huge foodstuff business that you may know of, has a venture studio. We call it Pet Tech. So they have a venture studio for food and tech for pets. And Procter & Gamble has P&G Ventures. It's not a CVC, it's a venture studio of Procter & Gamble. And they partner with another venture studio called M13. So you see a lot more activity. We actually work with large corporations as well in using the studio model in their innovation as well. So that's a bit of the context. And now I want to go in a bit like what's happening. Why are people investing in studios? Who's investing in them? Why are they investing in them? And what are some like early empirical data, the results of studios? And this is very timely. I'm happy that we're having this conversation early April and not like back in February, because March was by far the best month for the studio model in the 25-year history of the studio model. The 5 venture builders in the US raised over $1 billion in funding in 25 days. So it is just for any naysayer saying that the studio model, is not going to work, or it's like a one-off thing, it's not here to stay, etc. That argument is now over. After this past month, with Atomic raising their 3rd fund, they have a studio fund. I can tell you more about how that is structured. We are structured like that as well. They raised $260 million more in March. Pioneer Square Labs, our friends based in Seattle, raised another $100 million as their 3rd fund. High Alpha raised their 2nd fund, $110 million, based out of Indianapolis. Indianapolis, in the US is not this entrepreneurship or innovation haven that you would think about, compared to the coasts, be it San Francisco, Silicon Valley, LA, or Seattle, or New York, or now Miami. But High Alpha has had an incredible effect on that ecosystem just by their venture studio model. And they sit with us. They're members of GSSN as well. PSL sits on the board of GSSN with us as well. Juxtapose, I mentioned, they raised $300 million in March. And Redesign Health, this is, I think, probably interesting and probably worth some study for the audience here that are interested in health tech and biotech and how the studio model applies. They came out of nowhere. We had not actually heard of Redesign Health, surprisingly. And we just saw on Wall Street Journal that they, as a studio, had just raised $250 million to reimagine the future of like health tech. So all of that just happened in March, right? And if we dig a bit deeper, like if we look at like who else has raised money, I'm not going to go through and read this slide in great detail. I think these are some leading studios from US and Europe. They're interesting models, like Entrepreneur First is London-based. They now have different chapters. I just mentioned a few things. Rocket Internet, obviously Germany-based, launched in Berlin. So there are some European examples here. But the Forward Partners also is London-based, Europe-based. And what you see is like specialization. So Forward Partners is AI specialist, right? Where Atomic is B2C consumer services specialist. AI Fund, as the name suggests, it's AI specialist, has $175 million at launch. They raised $175 million to invest in AI tech, AI-backed ventures out of Silicon Valley. back in just about 2 years ago. And if you look at these list of investors, you have an incredible mix of investors from government sovereign wealth funds coming in to like Kinnevik, from Norway, for example, a big investor into Rocket Internet. BlackRock is a private equity investor coming into Forward Partners to actively build AI ventures. You have Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen, coming personally investing in Atomic. Felicis, a top-tier firm, investing directly in Atomic as well. And Entrepreneur First, which is, some people argue it's not a studio. We like to think of it as a talent scout studio, having an incredible list of government, educational, even accelerator, Y Combinator is an investor in Entrepreneur First, right? So I think the key takeaway from this slide is massive amount of funding is flowing into leading studios, venture builders, and there's a very wide, interesting mix of investors, be it the more typical VC investors to LPs that would normally invest in VCs, choosing to invest also in studios, to super angels and governments, right, coming in as well. And why are they investing? So in our research, we have gone and asked LPs, our LPs as well, our investors as well, why would they invest in us versus investing directly into ventures or to ventures indirectly through VC funds? And many of the people that we interviewed have experience doing both. And some of them have now a leaning towards our model. And really, two things come to the summary, right? One is investors of studios end up getting better economics. And there are reasons, there's kind of like double click into why they get better economics. And the ventures that are built after getting better economics have a better chance of success, right? And why does that happen? One thing that we have as studios versus an accelerator or versus a VC fund, we have what we call founder economics. We're institutional founders in a venture. Thus, typical venture builder, typical studio, a true venture studio will have 40 to 60%, 70%, 80%. In the case of Rocket, 99% ownership of the ventures that they build, right? And when you as an entity have such, sizable equity in a venture that is founded, and you have investors, you're able to share more with those investors coming in. So essentially tunneling through some of the founder economics that you get as a very early builder of a venture to those investors that invest in you or in your fund, right? So that's one key thing that our investors are excited about. They essentially, for the same amount of like $1 million spent, they get more equity in the underlying ventures that we built, right? Then there's less dilution because we end up being more efficient. We share resources, capabilities, databases, our tricks. We may have spent A/B tested and figured out how a certain type of campaign in AdWords, in Google AdWords, works better. We share that know-how with the next venture so that they don't have to waste money on Google. They can, spend that money on getting more customers to acquire or build more technology, hire another person for customer care, etc. Right? So you end up getting less dilution. You end up getting deal flow access. Our investors have insight into the ventures that we're building through the period in which we're building them, right? They don't hear about it just at the point where we are spinning them off. They've known about them and what are the rockstar ventures that we're building throughout the journey. And they're there when the moment we're raising money externally, they can double down and put more money and get more equity in the winners of our portfolio, right? And finally, recycling. Not everything that we build, every studio fails, right, as it should. And our failure rate is lower, and I'll show you that in the next slide. But when we fail, in a typical VC portfolio, if one of my ventures fail and I write it off, that founder who's learned something with my investment goes and builds its next venture, maybe without me investing. They're just now using the learnings from my investment for someone else's benefit. Whereas in the case of a studio, because we spend the money and we learned in the studio how to do something better, even if a venture is shut down and we fail, the learnings or even the bad things that we know not to do again are things that we keep and we recycle within the system so that we are more efficient and faster and better in the next build. Okay, so that's the better economic side, just more efficient and giving more equity to the investors. And then better chance of success comes from we ideate better, we think, right? We have a methodology. Typical venture is often, two friends sitting in a restaurant and while having, dessert saying, oh, somebody should solve this problem. And then they say, oh, like we should solve that problem, right? And that is not maybe the best way of ideating, coming up with a business idea, but it's very common. And it's also not the best way of coming up with a team, right? Best friends don't necessarily make best partners. They may not have complementary skill sets, etc. So we, in general, have a better ideation methodology, we feel. And then we have a better access to talent, arguably, because if you look at our founders or our studio team, I would argue that if we were doing one-off ventures, some of them would not have joined us. The vision is bigger. And because that vision is bigger and they feel they're going to have support, a lot of very talented people who would not become normally entrepreneurs try their hand on entrepreneurship. When you become a founder with us, you get a respectable salary. There is no risk of you not getting a salary for 6 months or a year. Your wife or your husband is not complaining, why are you giving up the corporate job, right? So people see less risk in coming and joining us. And they see that we're going to be supporting you. Like for 2 years, you come in and you're not going to raise money. We've done that, right? You can concentrate 100% of your time in building your venture, which you're passionate about. So it triggers a lot more new talent that would otherwise not be, trying their hand at entrepreneurship. And then we have these shared resources that, I talk about. We have a playbook, right? You know exactly once you finish step 19, that step 20 is this. Of course it changes. And of course we're constantly learning. And so it's a live document that keeps improving. But there is no doubt like, oh, how do I find this kind of talent in this country? We have a playbook, a tool for that, a place to go for that, right? And existing agreements with, online job portals to go seek that, talent, etc. As an example. If you want to build a quick landing page, we have a tool for that. We have an AI tool that you can just type in a business idea and it'll come up with hundreds of businesses that are in the same field from around the world. It goes and uses NLP to scan the internet to find similar businesses, and you can quickly do a study of different models that have been applied and which one has been successful. So those shared resources definitely increase chance of success. And there's a brand effect. I think it's happening now with us. Enhance is a known commodity in our region. And people say, oh, they're the first studio and they're building good ventures. So more people are willing to come in and people want to work with us. A brand new venture benefits from the success of a previous venture we built, right? Especially when we were building marketplaces, we're more easily able to attract marketplace vendors, for example, in a new venture. Because we've done things in the past and we have a brand name. That's a bit why the investors are investing. What are the results? This is actually quite astonishing. We did research. This is not our direct research. This is research that we've helped and a white paper that we helped write. But if you download the latest white paper from GSSN, you'll see that for the first time we ran a comparison between a large group of traditional startups as a cohort versus startups started by studios. And we see a staggering difference between ventures that are started by startup studios and ventures started, standalone and tried to go the venture capital route, the typical route. And these are all, I think all of the ventures are CB Insight study results. And they're all US based. I think some few hundred ventures are involved in that study. And we include about, I think, 30 studios and their ventures in our study. But incredible increase in IRR, more than doubling. The total value to pay in capital is like more than 3x, almost 4x, on coming. Time from like 0 to Series A, we're less than half, right? And less than a third from 0 to seed. So it is an incredible acceleration, and you don't have to take my word for it. Doug Baer is from Radiance Capital in the US, and he's one of the more prolific investors in studios. I think their strategy has essentially become that they invest going forward only in studios. I believe they're an investor in Atomic and a couple of their funds. And this is what Doug says. Like, if you're in disruptive investment strategies, you have to be now looking at venture studios, venture building as part of your consideration as well. A bit more, I'm not going to go, so a bit different way of showing. It's an incredible 60% of the startup studio ventures actually reach Series A. That is not the norm at all out there in the industry. And this is how that time difference to seed and Series A shows. This is for startup studios, venture builders, and this is for traditional startups, right? And there are a lot of unicorns and successful stories. And this is actually our venture, Joy, based out of here as well. I want to touch a bit about ecosystem building and how the startup studios can support ecosystem building. I like the triangle that was mentioned by Mr. Martin. A different way that we've looked at it, when I was at MIT, I was part of research that looked at why some ecosystems succeed versus some ecosystems are slow to succeed or fail, right? And the categorization that we did, like on areas, was these 5. An ecosystem needs improvement and support on these 5 fields to succeed, according to that research that we did. And the first one is government. It's essentially answering question like, how easy and cost effective is it to set up and operate a business, right? How is it easy? Is it easy to employ and terminate people, right? I know, for example, some of my Western European, studio founder friends are complaining that when you're trying a venture, you want to try it. If you hire people and you cannot fire them in 3 months, the model fails, right? So that kind of support is needed. And funding is a major one, right? Is funding available for startups, be it through studios, venture builders, or directly, if somebody's building by themselves? Access to markets, access to customers. It's a very interesting one for Bulgaria. You mentioned that Bulgaria itself is not a very large market, but it's part of Europe. But I think a lot of Bulgarian startups probably start day one being international or have to think international, right? And then there's access to talent, which is the education piece. And but it's not only about getting degrees, but having the empirical, like the know-how. Do you know how to operate that supercomputer that was mentioned, right? And get results out of it. Not that you have a computer science degree, but something that's applicable for business. And then finally, not to be forgotten, culture, right? And the studio has the model has ways of reducing friction on all of these, right? If it's difficult on all of these different, areas, it's almost more favorable for the studio, because when the studio solves it, then it can give that recipe, that solution, one by one to its ventures, and those ventures, in comparison to a standalone venture, are at a great advantage and have a higher chance of success. We built the studio model because we want to build scalable businesses across 15 countries, 16 countries, right? It's very difficult to build a business across 16 countries, and we don't even have a union like European Union in this region. But the fact that now we've done it across 8, it's a great advantage. We can launch a venture, day one in 3 countries. Nobody else can do that if they're launching a standalone venture, right? So studios, by coming in and saying, I'm going to collectively problem solve for these 5 areas, ends up giving a shot in the arm of an ecosystem. And the key word that I really would like you to remember from this is proactivity, right? Humbly, like our ecosystem here does not have time to wait for venture capitalists to raise funding, right? New funds launch, and then they sit around waiting for two genius people to walk in the door with the right idea so that they can invest in them and they can, build a scalable, large scale-up business, right? We don't have the time. You can do that in Silicon Valley. You can do it in New York. You can do it in China, or in London even, maybe, where there's so much talent, so much money that waiting doesn't take that much time. But if you're an early stage ecosystem, and as I understand, you would categorize Bulgaria as such, right? You don't have time to wait. You want to go faster. So be proactive. And by its nature, the studio model, as it was being mentioned before my talk, is about building. We don't go and say, hey, why don't we just wait for brilliant people to walk in the door? We go and say, what does this market need? And if the market needs this in ideation phase, okay, we can build a business and it can be sizable. We have ways of measuring that and hypothesizing that. Who are amazing couple founders that we can tap on the shoulder and bring on board. We have an application process as well. Some founders apply to us as well, right? But we're proactive. Every quarter we launch a new business. We're not waiting for people to walk in the door with a great idea that happens to match our strategy, right? And that's the key thing that I think early stage ecosystems have to consider the studio, the venture builder model for. How am I doing with time? I have just a couple more slides.
Christina, you.
Hi. Can we back to the studio? Thank you, Alper. It was fantastic, and thank you that sharing all this knowledge with us. I believe that the first step, which is awareness, is made today. So great.
Sure.
I'm impatiently expecting our discussion session. Our next representative is Martin Schiederup, who is having a unique opportunity being Bulgarian, but still living in UK and having access directly to the best know-how. And I'm sure and expecting from him, of course, to leading us, to guide us, and to share how we can actually implement and take advantage on being here, to having this expertise. And as Alper said, there is no time. So please, Martin, are you ready to share your presentation, your opinion?
Yes, absolutely. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, great.
Totally.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
And
thank
Martin,
you to
I'm sorry to interrupt, Martin, but there will be a Q&A session afterwards, right?
Yeah, sure. At the end, it will be a discussion session where we will trying to find out the way how actually all these fantastic models could be implemented here in Bulgaria.
Yeah, can I just double check, how is everyone with time? Because we are overrunning quite a bit.
It's not an issue, I believe, because the topic is so interesting.
I have time. I'm here. I have time.
Okay, cool. And
I still have time.
Okay, great. So let's let's continue as planned, and because I think the discussion session will be the cherry at the end. So we're all looking forward to it. So first of all, I wanted to thank Alper for this fantastic presentation. Very difficult to follow now after you, but very interested to see your views and everyone's view on how this model can potentially be applied to more of a scientific proposition or life sciences biotechnology. Because in my view, the dynamics there are different. The length of time you need, as Alper mentioned. There is no time, but in terms of biotechnology in this sector, patience and patient capital is very important. So hence why the discussion will be very interesting at the end. So yeah, as Christina mentioned, so I live and work in the UK, work for EY, has been very closely involved with supporting the British government for attracting innovative companies, capital investment. So work very closely with the ecosystem here. Hence why my presentation was very much focusing on the impact of venture building or technology transfer in the life sciences sector on economic development. So I covered the different components which I see here in the ecosystem. I talk about life sciences, which is obviously a topic of interest for the audience, but I think is one of the very exciting platforms which showcases what can be done in venture building and spinning out of companies. And I kind of go through the different components that build this venture build proposition in the UK. But it'll be interesting again at the end for us to discuss and touch on the topic of the secret sauce, which Alper already mentioned, but let's see how this is applied to this sector and potentially to the Bulgarian market. Before I go into the core presentation, I wanted to start off first with a bit of a differentiation of a science venture builds and then maybe the mainstream venture builds, and the way I see it, or I think it is it's happening in a sector such as life sciences. In both cases, there is a moment of developing an idea and spinning it out for commercial benefits. In the scientific context or the life sciences context, there is a bit more of a translation of a deep science experimental research into commercial proposition, which adds some level of complexity. The sources of the ideas could be quite different, I think, in a scientific venture build, when we would deal with academia, centers of excellence, even medical doctors and clinicians to be offering these ideas that have impacts on human health. Infrastructure in scientific or science-based venture build might be, or the need of infrastructure could be different. So an office or a co-working space may not be sufficient, but more of a hard infrastructure such as labs, diagnostic equipment, and supercomputers already mentioned could be of significant importance. The customers are different, the customer needs and the buying cycles. So here we talk about healthcare systems, we talk about doctors, medical professionals, patients. And again, the notion of time is very interesting comment, but for life sciences or scientific venture, you need quite a bit of time. You need very much of a long-term vision and patient capital to make it happen. In terms of the sector, so life sciences, I mentioned, I feel it's one of the great platforms to showcase what can be done in venture builds or spinning out acceleration of innovation. Is one of the sectors of significant importance for any country, just because it builds resilience and prosperity. This is what we see in the UK, significantly emphasized importance on the sector, particularly in the sense of promoting research and development. So the economic impact are significant, and the data shows that for every one job created in life sciences, there are another 5 created in the economy or somewhere in the supply chain. And for every £1 invested in research and innovation, there are another £3.60 or roughly for of economic benefit created. Therefore, R&D and creation of innovation is such an importance and makes such a contribution that it attracts a lot of private interest. So on the one hand, we have the government very much focusing on promoting R&D and research and innovation, as we also see here, and we discuss in the concept of Bulgarian ambition. But the results are very interesting. It unlocks a lot of private external interest from industry who invest and stimulate the research and development. And one recent example from actually from your region, Mubadala investment company recently committed £800 million in a joint venture partnership with the UK government, who on their half invested 200 million, so altogether £1 billion to invest specifically in life sciences for a period of 5 years, just because of the significant opportunities they see in research and innovation. Apart from the economic value, there is very much of a human-centric importance of this sector and venture building in this sector. I'm not going to go through the nitty-gritty details and all the stats, but even leaving COVID aside, we've seen how vulnerable we can be as a population. There are a number of other factors, such as aging population, growing chronic conditions, unmet medical needs. But also the increasing or the ever-increasing healthcare expenditures, which require new ideas, new ventures to be created in order to tackle these problems. In terms of the industry dynamics, I think this is another important component when it comes to building ventures and when it comes to the impact which the industry has on the ecosystem. Obviously, life sciences, pharmaceuticals, very massive industry, very big industry, 1 trillion. But interestingly, is very much kind of split 50-50. So 50% are the big players that we are all aware of. They acquire the smaller biotech spin-out companies, which are the other 50% of the industry. But the big names, they very much rely on innovation coming out of these companies, hence why 40% of the revenue which they generate, which Big Pharma generates, comes from licensing opportunities with smaller companies. And we've also seen in the current pandemic real-world examples of how a small biotech would cooperate with a big pharma and a university. So we've seen the case with BioNTech and Pfizer. We've seen that with Vaccitech and AstraZeneca and Oxford University, and the importance of creating a flow or having a pool of these innovative companies to feed the bigger players in the industry. That's why the UK's focus, UK strategy has been very much of very clear on that, very much focusing on technology transfer, which is maybe another name of venture building, more towards the scientific or academic space. We're focusing on technology transfer, which is primarily discovering, developing, and protecting very often experimental research or deep science, in creating commercial propositions for the global market. And that's all very much guided by the UK's ambition to be become and remain a science superpower. In terms of the spin-out market in the UK, which is essentially that it represents the ventures that are built by a number of different institutions and players in the market. I would say it's the bedrock of innovation in the UK and in the life sciences industry. It's a large market by itself. There've been about over 1,400 spin-outs generated over the course of the last 10 years. It's a big employer, close to 6,000 jobs, but it also generates a lot of revenue for the institutions, for the academic institutions, universities. 61 million pounds generated for 2020, which is 37% year-on-year increase since 2017. But they also have a kind of additional indirect economic value add. So for every spin-out generated, they contribute, or each of them contribute by another £2.5 million to the economy. It unlocks a lot of capital, not only internally in the market. So equity investment in spin-outs for last year was 1.3 billion. out of 11 billion in the UK. So very much of a epicenter of fundraising in Europe for 2020. But this market continuously attracts foreign investment, foreign capital. And I already mentioned Mubadala, but there's been consistently the case, 15 to 20% comes from external sources. And again, similarly to what you presented, Alper, the valuation of the value of the company because of the controlled, maybe the controlled growth, maybe that's one interesting similarity, is much higher at seed stage than non-spin out companies. In terms of the other big factor and the clustering, here, just very quickly to mention about the Golden Triangle, which is, as we all kind of familiar, we know is the hotbed of innovation in the UK, but very much driven by this sort of early stage technology transfer and spinning out companies. So 1/3 of all spin outs are creation of 4 universities only in the Golden Triangles: Oxford, Cambridge, UCL, and Imperial. Oxford seems to be the one with the most active, the largest pipeline of volume and value as well in terms of investment. 200 spin-outs, above 200 has been generated by the university across 450 rounds, equity rounds, 2.5 billion. So a lot of activity there. And we've seen some fantastic results, some unicorns as well, such as Oxford Nanopore, at the moment one of the big unicorns in the UK, and some big exits such as Nightstar Therapeutics, which was sold by the University of Biogen for close to 600 million. So again, as similarities in that sector to what you, Alper, presented in your presentation. But here, the big game changer is the big funds. So here, in the sense of Oxford, in the context of Oxford, we have Oxford Science Innovation, which is a 600 million capital fund, specifically focusing on deep science, biotech, AI technologies. The image below shows that, so essentially that's a timeline starting from the 90s into the present days. So since the creation of a big fund and a big player, a capital investor in the ecosystem, you see how the whole ecosystem has exploded with spin-outs, which further underlines the importance of having a kind of a one big cornerstone supplier. Just very, very quickly, you don't really need to be in the Golden Triangle to succeed. So in terms of thinking about the venture build components, think about the region. You don't need to be coming out of a region with inherited wealth and culture of entrepreneurship to succeed. There are a number of other examples across the UK. I would say the most notable one would be the one coming out of University of Bristol. It's a company called Xylo, which is a smart insulin spin-out. The third biggest spin-out exit in the UK history, sold to Novo Nordisk, so to close to 580 million, just after 4 years. And interestingly, the success of this spin-out exit resulted in the creation of a greater sustainability in the ecosystem. So the founder invested in an incubator to use as a sort of venture build, venture build incubator to create new companies, to support new companies. So I covered a number of different components which could potentially help an ecosystem to develop new ventures, specifically in the life sciences industry, life science sector. But there are a number of activities and a number of kind of practical points which the successful venture builders or technology transfer universities follow, which are synthesized in this slide. So very important, the customer discovery. So there is an example from Queen's University Belfast that they do not touch essentially a spin out, or they don't progress it until they've had at least 100 conversations with potential customers. So in this industry, there is a bit of a misunderstanding that if you create patents and if you churn patents in IP, that's a venture built, and that's kind of a recipe for success. But on the contrary, it needs to be very much of applicable science. Alliances again is a big focus in how these institutions build partnerships with a number of other stakeholders, incubators, VCs, science parks, even, or accelerators to provide scale for the opportunity to justify fundraising. Talent as well. I guess that's an obvious one, but finding talent is not sufficient. Using talent is also a de-risking strategy, and that was also mentioned, okay, by your presentation. That talent is important, and building in a controlled way, not necessarily two friends sitting together over dinner is the best recruitment strategy, which I agree with you on that. Incentives as well. So you mentioned very interesting, the co-founding element in a venture build in a life sciences or scientific context. Working with university may not be that straightforward because of different strategies, different goals, different ambitions. In bringing together a VC or bringing together a venture build, commercial parties could be a complex dynamics. So some of the successful venture builders employ very much of a milestone-based or achievement-based kind of drip feeding of ownership, which is very popular. And finally, funding again is very much of a big part of it, but very much of a kind of a lean and milestone-driven funding. So finally, just to finish with specifically the funding models that I see in the UK and that seem to be driving the technology transfer and the spin-out activities and the venture building in the ecosystem. So on the one hand, we have funds such as Oxercise Innovation, which is very much of a single university-focused fund. Whereas on the other hand, we have someone like Scottish Enterprise, which is, as you can guess from the name, based in Scotland, but very much agnostic, very much kind of multi-player, multi-stakeholder focused fund. But interestingly, it's all very much public funded by taxpayers' money, and it's one of the very active investors. And in between, there is a mix of different things. There is a fund managers like Albion Capital, which again develop separate relationships with universities to support technology transfer and get ideas from the very early stage, from the source, but not exclusively working with these universities. But there are other mixes such as which I think is very interesting, which could be potentially applicable to the Bulgarian market, such as Epidarix. So Epidarix is a 100 million fund. It has a bit of a public investment. It has 5 universities working in an alliance format, which not only creates scale, but they've also put money in a fund, and also they've leveraged private capital, and they very much work in the sense of building as well as investing as a kind of a pure VC. So that's it for me. I think in terms of key takeaways, it's interesting to see again the discussion and what could work for the Bulgarian ecosystem, because maybe a single focused source of innovation might be a bit too difficult to utilize in an early stage ecosystem. Maybe a bit more of a holistic proposition which combines different stakeholders, different universities working together. But then there are some other complexities that need to be discussed and figured out. So that's from me. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to discussing this in the next section of the presentation.
Thank you, Martin. I will back to you in a discussion panel, of course. And right now, it's a great honor for me to give a word and provide the stage for Mr. Vladimir Danaiu, the Executive Director of Fund of the Funds. Hi, Vladimir.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much to Alper and Martin for the valuable analysis and the presentations. Really very interesting. Pretty much, well, a couple of questions and notes from those presentations. Alper just mentioned that pretty much the concentration of venture builder studios is in countries where it's harder to set up, and most of them are in Europe. So pretty much that's probably something that we need to think about. I mean, the governments and countries in Europe. And also, it's very good that it reduces the risk for venture capital. Great. I believe that even the local venture capital players are going to be really happy about it, and they are looking for options to reduce that. And something that I noticed, and it's going to be very interesting to go over into the discussion, that the majority of the equity, or a high percentage of the equity, remains in the venture builder studio, and probably are there issues with the motivation of the team? Probably that's going to be an interesting question to tackle during the discussion. And thank you very much to Martin for doing the overview of the UK market. So now we know what numbers we need to follow. 70 billion of pounds of revenues out of the biotech cluster in UK. And UK also produced like over 80 unicorns. So pretty much that's a very good goal for the Bulgarian ecosystem too. But back in Bulgaria, pretty much in the last 10 years, in the last decade, I think we made a big leap into building an infrastructure for innovation and startups. Like there was not venture capital, there was not anything like infrastructure a decade ago. But now we have a full-fledged ecosystem, incubators, accelerators, even events, and we are educating this entrepreneurial spirit, because I think Alper mentioned how the culture is very important. So entrepreneurial spirit is something that we are cultivating, and we believe that more and more should be found in among the Bulgarian entrepreneurs. We got around 15, 16 venture capital funds in Bulgaria. So probably now is the time that we have the most money, the most funding. Probably in the last 10 years, only through the fund of funds, we got now 4 and soon 5 fund managers, and they alone mobilized over 150 million euro for startups, for innovative companies, for technology transfer, everything that was mentioned today. And definitely, I think in Bulgaria, we are now at a stage to stimulate and intensify the pipeline development, and of course to strive for more efficient investments. So that's why I think that the venture building model seems like having a good potential to be developed in Bulgaria, and of course to contribute to the innovation, startup, and scale up further development. That's why at least our takeaway is that this is a very good avenue to think and to invest further, and to take into consideration for the further financial instruments that even our organization is going to structure. So back on the topic, why I was invited today, investment in science, and what is actually an innovation, and actually what is the role of the fund of funds. Well, everything that we structured, or at least all the instruments that we structured and that are concerning the small and medium enterprises, innovative companies, they are all structured to support the innovation in Bulgaria, and to really support all type of innovative technology, etc., developing contemporary companies. Why is that? Because our economy is shifting. The successful promise of our economy in the last years is based on efficiency, quality, and product orientation. Means lots of much more products or solutions to be invented here, and the commercialization to be started in Bulgaria. Of course, as it was mentioned earlier, because we are a small market, most of those companies, most of those products are adapted from day one to conquer the global market. So that's why I would like to just present what we've done, and pretty much if there is a local or foreign audience that is following the event today, just to know that we got those options for finance to support innovation and startup and innovation economy. Well, do you see my screen, by the way? Yeah, okay, good. So a couple of words about Fund the Funds and what do we do. We manage European money that are to support Bulgaria for innovation and to support Bulgaria for regional development. But today I'm going to focus my talk mainly for the innovation and the products that we have for science, innovation, and what is the topic today. So what do we do? We structure financial instruments to support innovation or to support growing companies in Bulgaria where traditional financial institutions cannot or they don't want. Imagine banks. Banks are not very prone to support sometimes very innovative companies because very simply, very innovative companies doesn't have that much of a tangible, valuable assets. So most of the innovation is an investment is intangible assets, and intangible assets can be a collateral. So in order for Bulgaria to shift successfully into direction to be a worthy rival to England, for example, as Martin said, I'm joking here, but why not? Why don't you have a very good example and a very good goal? We really need to be investing and also putting a huge focus over the innovation, creating, supporting the innovation, and also with financial support. So we're structuring financial instruments to support innovative companies that base their products on scientific research, on process innovation, all types of innovation. What we've done in the last couple of years is we already structured 5 funds. We structured 5 instruments, and there we selected 4 fund managers. And those first fund managers, 4 of them are already in investment mode, means that the money are on the market. So any idea or any entrepreneur could go and talk with them. You see the scale, which means that no matter at what stage of development is a particular company, startup, or it might not have a company, it might be just an idea, there is a fund manager that is going to support this idea. You see on the left side, the SASF stands for Seed and Acceleration and Startup Fund. This is our first fund. It supports ideas at the very early stage, acceleration and early stage, where only idea could exist. And we see on the other side of the spectrum is the mezzanine growth fund, which is, we hope that is going to be in investment mode in the second half of this year. Q3 after June 2021. As you can see, we mobilized around 150 million euro. This is only the money that are mobilized from our side, and probably additional private money are going to be mobilized in those investments, and we are going to have this multiplier effect for those funds. I would like to just say a few words about each of those fund managers. First of all, for them to be more promoted, and if there are entrepreneurs that are listening to us today, to be able to find a good supporter in their hands. The first of our funds is Innovation Capital. They're responsible for early stage and for acceleration phase. They already invest in companies, but up to 2023, they are going to invest is around 228 companies. I know this is not a very small number. That's why pipeline development, it's a very valid point, and that's why this venture building model that we are discussing today could be a very valuable and pragmatic topic for Bulgaria. The next fund, it's Venture Partners. Still, they invest in early stage and acceleration phase of development. They can invest up to 1 million level, half a million of euro in companies, and they are going to invest in 125 companies in the next 2 to 3 years. We got a fund manager, which is responsible for more mature stage of development of companies. This is New Vision 3. They also have some specialization in more technology-oriented companies. Also, of course, science-based, so companies that are into the biotech cluster in Bulgaria might also, and they have already a more mature phase of development, they might talk to them, so they can answer for investments up to 1 million euro. See, this fund is going to invest in 53 companies in the next 3 years. And we also have the venture capital fund, which is with the name Morningside Hill. They are investing in already more mature companies that are having already proven model, proven, validated product or service. And this is for companies that are looking to expand in terms of conquering new markets or expand their production facilities. So they can answer for investments up to 3.5 million euro. And as I already mentioned, the mezzanine fund, which is going to, and they also, the other 4 are equity and quasi-equity, but still the mezzanine shape of investment is more specific. They're looking for already mature companies, and they can answer to capital needs of between 2.5 and 7 million euro. So this is actually the scale of let's say, the spectrum of where our funds are impacting, the spectrum of impact of those 5 funds. And I repeat myself, but no matter at which stage of development is a particular idea or a company, they might find support within our 5 fund managers. Of course, as I mentioned, in Bulgaria, we have 10 more players which are also supporting companies. This is just a very small portfolio of companies that have been already financially supported by some of those fund managers. As it was mentioned, it's sector agnostic. Those companies, they got different backgrounds and they operate in different segments. For example, this company, Nasikomoto, it has a very interesting model. It produces a protein for animal food out of a fly with the name black soldier fly, which is kind of probably a biotech company. We got the whole cluster like Pinetics, False and Fire, which are in the e-wallets, in the payment, in the contemporary payment solutions. We got Bisportal there in the data analytics business. So we got a whole cluster of different companies and industries. So again, because this type of support through equity is not very popular in Bulgaria, and the fund of funds is also, let's say, a promotional organization, a development finance organization. We are not that focused over the return on investment. Of course, we look at this metric very carefully, but we also put a very strong focus on the impact that all those money are going to have on our innovation and startup ecosystem. That's why we invested in a division with the name Information and Financing Division, which advises the entrepreneurs, people with ideas, but also this is the entry point for collaboration with different stakeholders from abroad, like Alper, like Martin, to see what we could do and what models we could adapt in Bulgaria, what we can plan and foster for the near future. Again, we are managing European money, and now there is going to be the new multi-annual financial frame. So what could be executed in the best way? So we really accelerate the development of the innovative and startup ecosystem in Bulgaria. So pretty much that's from me in short. and I'm going to be very glad to take questions and to take part into discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Vladimir. Actually, we are eager to start working more proactively with the Fund of the Funds and all this opportunity that Mr. Danilov shared. Of course, the things that we need to think is how to support the deep tech companies, because it's quite different when it comes to deep tech, life sciences. Sometimes the investments are much risky, more bigger and taking more time, but at the end of the day, actually those are the successful example. I'm sure that Martin Shiderov and who will lead the discussion panel will point this thing, and I hope that we will together continue with this fantastic work. Thank you again to Mr. Vladimir Danilov. And our final guest to our today edition is Angel Hadziev, who is the Capital Investment Fund Manager next to Bulgarian Development Bank. Hi, Angel, are you here?
Yes, I'm still here.
Fantastic to see you here with us.
Last but not least.
I hope that you can share more about the fund, how actually can support the process. I know that you are working mostly with the growth companies, which is normal, but still we are trying to create early stage, very strong startup dedicated to the deep tech in order to have in the future those growth companies. And I'm curious to understand and to realize more about the fund and how it could be a logical partner to the process of venture build and all this model and possible solution that we discussed so far.
Okay, I need to begin with a brief apology to Alper. My presentation is actually in Bulgarian, but it's one slide, as a matter of fact.
No problem at all. No problem.
And I wasn't aware it's going to be in English, and we need to present it in English, so it's in Bulgarian. I apologize for that. But it's very brief. As a matter of fact, Capital Investments Fund was created as a legal entity in 2008 with the establishment of a law here in Bulgaria. And it's part of the Bulgarian Development Bank. As Martin mentioned, there is such an idea, even in Scotland, to use taxpayers' money to inject it into the economy in order to stimulate particular growth in this respect, companies. So the Capital Investments Fund, it is, as a matter of fact, directed towards growth equity. So it's not venture capital per se. So the typical companies that we are currently discussing in part of the bio cluster may not necessarily be fit for the investment strategy that we are aiming at. For the sake of the rest of the participants, I will present the one slide. Just bear with me, please. Okay. Please let me know when you
fantastic.
see the
We
screen.
can. Oh, no,
okay,
this
cool.
is. Yeah, we see the presentation.
Okay, essentially we've got 65 million leva, which is, as I said, taxpayers' money. And we are aiming at small and medium-sized enterprises, and we can participate up to 10% of our own equity, or up to 34% of the share of the actual company that we are going to invest. We are sector agnostic, apart from the other venture capital funds, some of which were mentioned by the fund representative, aim towards certain sector, and we are completely sector agnostic. As you can see from our portfolio companies, we already have 4 investments. which I think is pretty impressive based on the fact that we actively started investing. We actively started this fund at the end of last year. So we've got 4 companies already in our portfolio, and we've got a few more lined up in our pipeline. So that's, I think, pretty impressive. And as I said, this is one slide. I mean, it's not a lot. It's a short history, but it has a particular aim, and it's, as I said, stimulating small and medium-sized enterprises that already have proven track record, and now they've reached Series A type of funding that they need in order to accelerate their growth. And that's from my side, really. How we fit into what Christina would like to know, I think, and that would be interesting for the entrepreneurs, to say the least, how to reach us. I'm afraid Capital Investments Fund is not for them. It comes at a later stage. It comes at a much later stage. But I think it's something to have it in mind, because as you said, Alper, not many people have their guideline book. You know, they don't necessarily know when to call somebody. So it's really important for me as well, as a representative of the fund, to promote that, to even educate the ecosystem, if you like. So that's the reason why I accepted this invitation in the first place. And I'm ready to take any questions whatsoever.
Sure. Thank you again. I know that you having long experience connected and dedicated with investments, so I'm sure that into the discussion, your expertise and experience from other jobs that you already have, it will be really valuable. So right now, probably the most interesting moment for me is coming up. I want to invite Martin Shiderov, who will lead our discussion session, and I hope that we will learn more and more things, how exactly to implement venture build models in Bulgaria and what is the beneficial that they could bring. So Martin, are you ready to take my lead role?
Yes, great. Thanks, Christina. Okay, so yes, thank you everyone for your presentations. I would like to kick off with the, I guess, with the conclusion. So we'd like to, where do you want to get? We want to understand whether venture building is a good model for Bulgaria. And the benefits are, I think, fairly obvious, but you know, understanding whether it can be applied in our ecosystem. And I would like to kick off with the first question is for everyone, but maybe Alper, if you don't mind starting off. So you mentioned the application of venture build to hard to set up environments and early stage ecosystems. That's a very beneficial model. And Vladimir, he also mentioned that. So why is that? And what's the kind of the difference between this early stage underdeveloped economies or ecosystems with the more developed ones?
Well, I think regardless of what kind of studio you are, what kind of venture builder you are, your main goal every day is to support these founders succeed, right? Because when they succeed, you succeed. You're partners in a big way, often owning even half the equity, even more sometimes. And I'll get to that. That's a common objection, Vladimir. I'll get to that as well. So if you're a support organization, I think you are more valuable when more support is needed. So it's that kind of the basic logic that I think, and it's not only us saying this. When I talk to, we have advisory board members, you know, from leading American studios, and we are advisory board members to some American studios. So as we do our exchanges, they come visit us here, They walk the markets, they talk to fellow entrepreneurs or our founders, and they all agree that, hey, this model is even better for you. Because there's friction here, right? It is difficult if you're going to launch a business. You pick one country usually in this region. It could be UAE, it could be Saudi, it could be Egypt, it could be Jordan, where there's technical talent. It will take you a year or two before you raise enough money and build up enough track record to raise more money to launch in the second country. When we are a studio and we're already in 9 countries, I just take away years of investment, not only of money, but just figuring out how to get a trade license in a country where you don't live. Right? We have over 40 investors. That's the other thing. Those 40 investors are incentivized. We were talking about incentives to support all our ventures, not only one venture, all of our ventures, right? We have investors in Saudi, we have investors in Jordan and UAE. We have investors in Japan, in Finland, the US, etc. Everybody's aligned on this goal to support ventures, and that support is even more valuable when venture building by itself as a standalone startup is more difficult. One example I can give is fundraising, right? I think if you go to typical good fundable founder in Silicon Valley, a fundable one, probably spends 30-40% of his time, her time, in fundraising through the venture building process through different stages, right? It's still not zero, unfortunately. Too much time is spent and a lot of it is wasted in fundraising, right? In our region, I would say it's more than 60%, right? Because our investors are far and few in between, and our investors are in earlier stage ecosystems, less developed ecosystems, are not as well versed. They'll ask questions that they may be used to from their daily business. They may ask for 10 different versions of an Excel model, which we know is meaningless, right? They may ask for different version of this slide. They may ghost you for 2 months and come back, etc. We take away that need, right? You don't need to raise fund, your seed and Series A. We do it for you. We've already done it. And that 60% time saved from a founder is an incredible boost of potential success for that venture, right? Imagine spending twice the time in your product and your customer. What is the value of that, right? And I do want to inject, because Vladimir had a great objection. I want to actually not only talk about the positive things, I want to talk about the common objections that we hear. One is what Vladimir mentioned, this founder incentives. If we get 50% of the equity, there's 50% left to the founders, then of course there's investors coming in and we're both diluted, etc. Is that enough? In many cases, yes, it is. For the founders of a studio, working with a studio, it is, right? It is not if you're that, I want to be Mark Zuckerberg, I want to own it all, right? That, San Francisco archetype, it may not be, right? But if you're here, where it's so much more difficult to build and fundraise, etc., and your alternative is to go work for Oracle or SAP with zero equity, and I'm offering you 50%, that's an incredible upside, right? So while you're making not your market salary, less than your market salary, but respectable salary, right? So that's one objection that we see. Second one is focus. A lot of when we go and try to raise from our venture capital friends, they say, in early days, they would say, Alper, you're successful founder, why don't you just build this one venture and and exit that, then do another one. Focus, right? That's the other thing that we see. And it's a portfolio play. So I think some people are good enough and they have enough experience that they can parallel process. and some people, should focus. And I did focus. We did build ventures and we exited them, and now I feel like I can run parallel processes. And the last part is about funding. A fund of funds invests in a venture capital fund and pays the typical 220, that there's 2% management fee, right? Sometimes those LPs object and even write it into the LPAC that they cannot invest in structures like a studio, where we may have something like a management fee, right? Because the LP, I totally understand, a fund of funds doesn't want to pay management fees twice, right? So that comes up, but we don't have management fees. We have cost of doing business. A bit like, it just so happens that we have shared services in the center and we charge our ventures for that, right? We have to, that's how the lights keep on. But some LPs object to that, or some VCs say, I would love to invest in you, but my LPEG says that I can only invest in single standalone ventures. Sorry, that's blowing me the answer. I think I answered a previous question by Vladimir as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ope. Thank you for that. Okay, in terms of and that's again a question to everyone, and maybe Vladimir or Angel can share their experience with the Bulgarian ecosystem. How applicable do you think the venture build model is right now? Thinking about the funding sector and funding ecosystem in Bulgaria, thinking about innovation and research, and what the Bulgarian government is trying to achieve.
All right.
Vladimir,
yeah, thank you. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Oper, for bringing a topic to this question about the incentive and the motivation. Yeah, and you explained it very well. I think this model is applicable, of course, because let's see what's the reality through our, let's say, the goal of our funds is somewhere between 400 and 500 companies to be funded in the next 3 years. Here are the colleagues from the Bulgaria Development Bank, and we got probably around 10 more funds here. So pretty much, if you ask the venture capital, they're going to see, well, where we are going to find those companies from, So pretty much we really need to take initiatives to support the pipeline development. And of course, not just the pipeline, but quality pipeline, something that is really, it got potential in there. So of course, everything that we heard about the venture build model promises that probably the ideas that are going to be funneled through this model, most likely they're going to fly. We saw the statistics that most of the ideas, they really fly and do good after that, perform well after that. So, accelerating the pipeline, yeah, I see that this model could be applicable. Second point is that probably, as Oper mentioned, that because Bulgaria, let's say 15, 17 years ago, it was mainly outsourcing. Many international huge corporations came here to do like operational excellence, But as a byproduct, they educated our professionals. We got the top-notch professionals in Bulgaria that are really trained according to the global standards. And sometimes those are very knowledgeable professionals, and they only know corporation. And someday they wake up and they might have a desire to try probably something more entrepreneurial. Maybe their data analytical skills are great for a startup that is going to go through a venture build model. So probably that's an option for those professionals to taste what is it to work in a smaller scale organization, something very innovative, contemporary, and to bring their support, their knowledge to that. And probably that's going to really develop their taste for, a more entrepreneurial exercise. So I think that's also a very positive thing about applying the venture building model. I saw on the scale in Oper's presentations that it takes more money. It burns more capital, as I got it correct. Let's say than the accelerators programs because they're short and they got budgets, let's say. But probably now at this stage of development in Europe and in Bulgaria, probably the capital ain't gonna be such a big issue. So yeah, I think that we should definitely try this model in Bulgaria. It could really produce, we can really jump or accelerate the time. We can leap 5 years ahead, for example.
Great, thank you, Vladimir. And before I go to Angel, Alper, do you have a comment about the burning money question?
Yes, you do. I mean, maybe burn is not the
invest.
It sounds a bit like wasting, but I think like yes, there's a monthly burn, and because we cover more months, of that development, and we're actually building, right? We're writing it's our team that develops the first version of the code, and only at spin out you're kind of building the full team for the venture for standalone. And yes, we do spend more because we do the actual building, and that's okay, right? And I think that's what Vladimir was saying as well. It's expensive. Techstars is supporting, with free resources. I work for free for Techstars, right, as a mentor, whereas my iOS developers don't work for free. So that does happen. But I also want to say that it's not a competition. So the ecosystem actually works well when there are accelerators, there are studios, there are VCs, there are fund of funds, right? It's hand in hand, because when I spin a venture out, even if a venture capital fund has not invested in me, because he has an LPAC problem, somebody has to invest in the ventures that I'm spinning out, and they're lining out the door, right? Because they know that some processes are in place, and we have groomed our founders in a certain way that our decks make sense. I mean, and we're going to be live in multiple countries across the region. So that is an important point. Same thing with accelerators, right? Accelerators go train people. If you look at the numbers, a lot of things coming out of accelerators don't succeed, right? But accelerators add a lot of value, and they train people. And some of the people that are coming out of accelerators are potentially very good founders for us, right? So
yeah, excellent, great, thanks for that, Alper. So Angel, do you just coming back to you in terms of your views on the applicability, and you also mentioned you obviously come into kind of later stage, a growth stage. But you made a comment about this sort of streamlining of 51 steps and processes and things that can be applied to more of a later stage growth stage. What were your views?
Well, absolutely. To me, hearing about the idea in the first place is promotion, education, if you like. Promotion the idea instead of wasting money and resources trying to get that funding that you need for your startup. If you knew who to reach in the first place, that would have saved you a lot of your nerves, to say the least. If you know the ecosystem in the first place, if you know those steps, I don't care what the guidebook is. It could be 51 steps, it could be 151 steps. But if you know the concept of what follows and what needs to be reached, what stage you are, if you come to the realization of where my business is today and what I want to be tomorrow and how to get there, is very important. And that could be any. I couldn't agree more. I think every single player is needed in that ecosystem. I don't think one is obsolete and should be scrapped. Quite the opposite. I think they're complementary. And to add on to that, the fund that I represent is a typical exit strategy for a VC. But do companies know that? I don't think so. It's not a common. It's not the first thing that you think of.
Yeah, thank you for that, Angel. And just as I have you on the spotlight, do you think you as a fund have a role in? I mean, obviously we talk about venture building and early stage streamlining in best practice, supporting a growth stage. But do you think you have a role in reverse, your experience educating the the bedrock of innovation, of very these sort of early stage ideas and kind of venture build kind of processes. Do you think you have a role in that?
As a mandate, it's a growth equity fund, but as an add-on, like Alper can dedicate some of its time in Techstars, I think it's more than needed for the entire ecosystem.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Just want to go back to a little bit to the topic of science, because it's a sort of an overarching theme here. And what I touched on briefly in my presentation, which was life sciences and deep technology and biotech. So Alper, just to start first with you, I mean, do you think the concepts that you talked about, you presented, that are very successful in a number of situations are applicable to that sector? And you mentioned Hash Health, and I know of them, and they are focusing on blockchain, specifically healthcare, and they have some great solutions. But when it comes to deep technology and science, do you see applicability?
So, well, deep tech is difficult, right? And I come from deep tech, like from that first career that I had, designing millimeter wave receivers and sending them to space. And but I think there are the two comments here. One is innovation is invention plus commercialization, right? So the invention part is more difficult and takes longer, when it comes to deep tech by definition. And yet there's still certain things in invention that are repeatable processes, right? And if there are repeatable processes and there are shared resources, then the model would apply even to that part, right? Commercialization for sure, right? I think that this is what MBAs are all about, right? There are literally degrees saying that there are processes in how we commercialize stuff, whether it's deep tech, whether it's consumer products, FMCG, etc. That one I have no concerns about. The invention part of deep tech and applying the studio model for that, I think that it is applicable. It will take longer. It'll take a different kind of investor, right? There are studios that are doing SaaS and they're trying to churn ventures out in 6 to 9 months. But if you're doing biotech and drug discovery, that probably is not reasonable, right? So you have to have a different timeline and different processes. But this sharing culture, sharing processes still applies. And the second comment is there are examples of this. Hashed is one, but Hashed is not as deep tech as, let's say, a studio that would do drug discovery. A great example is Flagship Pioneering. Right, Flagship Pioneering is the parent company, the studio that started Moderna, right? Along with 200 something other ventures. I think they have over 2,000, patents, and I think that's very relevant. And that stemmed out of MIT and the kind of the Cambridge, Boston, Cambridge biotech, presence there. Proto Ventures is just now launching at MIT again. I know about MIT ecosystem, so Proto Ventures is launching, and they're saying this deep tech stuff is difficult, and we have amazing deep tech at MIT. They have all these, professors and research assistants coming up with all this incredible stuff. Some of it biotech, right? And we need to let some of these ideas breathe and go into a process in which more companies come out of them, right? And we commercialize some of these technologies that MIT is, doing the R&D on. So that's a new example that's coming. And the other example that is worth looking at, and I think it's very interesting, is New Lab in Brooklyn, in New York City. New Lab is actually, funded in great part by Brooklyn. They took the old Navy Yards in Brooklyn, this amazing, beautiful building. They renovated it, and they built a deep tech studio in there. I haven't heard of if they're doing anything in biotech, but I mean, they're doing like deep tech in mining.
Yeah.
So, and very interesting collaboration in that triangle that you mentioned, like with universities, not only in New York City, but across the US and even globally, and with corporations that on the business side globally, right? So the model is being applied with some level of success. It's not, because it takes longer, I don't think there's as much yet empirical data to say that it applies really well and it's super successful, but I don't see a reason why it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
It's much easier to say, hey, in SaaS it works, right? eFounders, $1 billion, in portfolio, it's SaaS, right? Developing code for SMEs is much faster than developing medicine. So,
yeah. But I think you're right. I think the kind of sharing of resources, processes, vision is very important, particularly for the biotech space, because the risk is very high. The timelines are very long. So the more you share, the more you complement resources and share expertise, the more you de-risk a venture of this type. And there are examples in the UK, such as Syncona, which is very niche. They're only focusing on cell and gene therapy, which is extremely complex. But their asset under management is around £1 billion. So they have very patient capital. They're not rushing for quick wins. So it's a different model, but again, as you mentioned, shared models and applicable models across. But as we are on the topic of funds, I just want to ask Vladimir, maybe for your views and your thoughts on how the Bulgarian fund ecosystem would look like, let's say in 3 to 5 years' time, with respect to investing in science and innovation. Where do you see kind of the transformation happening? Where do you see the equity gaps are? And obviously, what would you think the role of the funds would be in addressing those?
Well, yeah. Well, pretty much in 5 years' time, it's going to be, half of the time it exists. So pretty much, I think lots of lessons learned are going to be applied, and I think, I hope, and I believe that that's achievable. We are going to accelerate the development of our ecosystem. Much more companies and let's say, potent ideas. I mean, good ideas with good teams. They are going to be on the market, and pretty much I believe that more and more companies are going to be successful at international scale. Where are the gaps? Probably we are going to have more. We are going to need, and we are going to have more capital for scale-ups for companies that are on more advanced stage of development. So probably that's going to be something that we are going to achieve. Also, as it was mentioned earlier, more of collaboration with science that's going to bring more sophisticated products and solutions, which are going to really work well for the whole ecosystem. It's kind of the chicken or the egg. Earlier we just had this science, but now we are going to apply the science into the products and solutions. So let's say probably that's going to be something that we're going to achieve in the next 5 years. Of course, with the instruments, because for example, our organization, it was the first time we structure financial instruments. We are going to be better in terms of implementation of financial instruments. We are going to be faster and, of course, probably more successful. So more money are going to reach the companies and the innovation. Well, that's general. It's a very positive outlook, how we see it.
Great, thank you for that, Vladimir. And I think just as a kind of reaching the final kind of points of discussion, we touched on what needs to be done, but it would be good to maybe have a little bit more of a clarity of where we start from. So we talked about building a pipeline, we talked about the motivation, we talked about collaboration. But what do you think are the logical next steps in terms of where Bulgaria should start from? Because it's difficult to boil the ocean, and there's so many opportunities, very little time. But what would you say the key priorities to start first with is a early stage ecosystem? To Alper, do you want to start first, and then we go around to share our kind of views?
So, as the playbook person, right, I am not an expert in Bulgarian, entrepreneurial ecosystem. So, what I can comment is like what we normally see as a playbook, and I'm specifically speaking about having, the studio model applied to an ecosystem as a turbo boost, kind of that proactive injection of early stage quality deal flow. I think first thing that is done is looking at, that ecosystem, and if there's an agreed upon innovation strategy for the ecosystem, that, what are 1, 2, 3, 4 focus areas, right? It may be biotech, it may be AI, or it may be like, just consumer services, but there's probably in any given ecosystem 2, 3 things where you see quick wins, or if success is reached, it's going to be really meaningful. If that is the case, then the next thing to say is, how can we take those priorities, and to which of those priorities does the studio model best apply? And we're doing this kind of exercise with a local, regional government, and there's an innovation strategy, and now we're making this decision of, should this government be involved in launching a studio where they would be an owner and like cooperator, or they should become a host of multiple studios, like somehow make it attractive for studios to either launch there natively, or for international studios to come and set up shop there, right? And start generating this early stage deal flow. So there is kind of this build your own or attract decision. And again, that changes. And then once that decision is made, okay, if you're going to, usually it's attract, right? You want to attract multiple studios to come and set up shop. And maybe if you have 3 priority areas, have a studio to just like kickstart the studio model in your ecosystem, have 1 studio for each one of those verticals, and attract someone that has done it before, right? Then what does it take? We have, in this region, we've done surveys on what would make this region, UAE, for example, attractive for a European studio to come and set up shop here, right? There would be a similar exercise to figure that out for your ecosystem, for example, and then you take action, right? That's the kind of playbook. What are your priorities? In which of those priorities can the studios, have a positive impact? What is kind of the ballpark quantification of that impact, right? Is it really going to matter? Because we're going to build a studio, and at the end, you're going to have 2 startups that succeed out of it. It's not worth it, right? What can we really achieve? And then how do you do it, essentially? Do you do it yourself? Do you attract others to come and do it? And, what would you have to change among those 5 things that we mentioned? What would you have to change to attract those people to come in and operate there? Right.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that, Alper. I think this angle of whether you build 1 studio or attract more, it's very interesting. So that's another interesting topic for further discussion, I'm sure. But Vladimir or Angel, any kind of final comments in terms of the sort of lessons learned from today, and some practical follow-up actions and next steps?
Do you want to go ahead? Yeah, to me, it is important to not only identify those priorities, but also your partners in those priorities. There are notably fund of funds, but there are fund managers that should be reached out and to try and identify whether they're, because there's money, obviously, we found out there's money, but would they be interested in that specific area? Would it be AI? Would it be deep tech or deep biotech or whatever you want to call it? Where based on where you want to concentrate on your priorities, and you already have that network, so you should basically leverage on that network. So that comes as a second stage after identifying those priorities, but your priorities will always come first, and leveraging on the network comes second. And I think you already have established that, and today's call is a proof of that.
Great, thank you, Ango. And Vladimir, your views?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. If I could complement my previous answer, but also it's answering this question too. Well, we're going to be in which direction we are heading. See where we position Bulgaria borders with Serbia, with Macedonia. We got, some other southeastern countries like Ukraine and some other close to our culture. So pretty much as we have right now a full-fledged ecosystem that supports innovation and startups, as we are having, and we are going to be having more and more money for such investments, and probably we are going to have a venture build studio here. Probably it's a very good to be positioned in Bulgaria, so it could really attract startups, etc., from all those neighboring countries. But this is actually a very good goal, and pretty much I think it's already kind of very homogeneous as an idea among the venture capital investors in Bulgaria. At least we are having these discussions in the association, that pretty much we really work proactively towards positioning of Bulgaria as a hub, which have everything that needs for development of innovation and startup, etc., further to really go beyond for scale-ups, etc., and to be the southeastern hub for all those countries and for all those companies. Anyway, we mentioned that we need a more significant pipeline, so this is another source. So pretty much this is probably the direction of development of the local ecosystem. More mingle with other ecosystems produces better results.
Great, thank you, Vladimir. I certainly picked up 3 P's: priorities, partners, and pipeline, as a kind of a very much of a. I don't know if we managed to get 4P model here.
Very consultant-like.
Yeah,
well done,
very.
Martin.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the very interesting, very fruitful discussion, and that's from us. So back to the Clubhouse. Christina, any final comments or questions?
Thank you, Martin. It was quite interesting. Actually, probably I will make a short resume why we choose the venture build as a possible solution for our innovative ecosystem. To answering this question, there are 2 more questions. The first one, what we have. We understand that we're having a very strong, interesting ecosystem with the different stakeholders. We have a strong academia. Actually, only in Bulgaria, the biological, chemistry, mathematician, we call it correct science. And we're having a very strong STEM traditions. Of course, we're having, because of our geographical positioning, we're having actually easier markets, not only to the European Union, but also a different continent. So we are positioned very well from the point of view of access to the different markets. We're having equipment, laboratories. We have a fantastic scientists that, but probably this is the time again to repeat that according to the Stanford classification of the best scientists in the world, 50 of them are Bulgarians. So all these things showing that we have the needed resources to working and to create unicorns, but still we don't have it. Why? We pointed to several needs that we find during our founding 3 years ago with Dimitar. Being innovative companies dealing with the deep tech means that you need more than investment. Of course, the investment, it is requirement, but not the usual one. Martin Shidorov mentioned about those patient capital. Yes, for sure, they are needed. but also we need expertise, we need valuation and validation of our scientific discovery, because in Bulgaria, who is actually saying this science is the good one and best one? Nobody, because nobody want to take this this over him. So therefore we are searching proactively and working with international partners, because we see that those validation and evaluation can be achieved from there. Something else which is missing, we spoke about accelerators. Sure, in Bulgaria we have a good accelerator programs, but still we don't have such which are experienced with the deep tech. I will show you, give you a very fast example. I met 2 weeks ago with 2 scientists who are trying and right now being part of one accelerator. They wanted to make, I don't know, a bus station. This is the advisement come from the accelerator mentors, which are not understanding, of course, the science, and they don't understand the deep science, valuation, patient capitals, etc. And when me and Dimitar meet with those guys, actually, we understand that they having significant science behind them, not the bus station, etc. They have materials, they have ecological, they have a life science solution,
Graphene.
which what?
Graphene.
Yeah, graphene. This is, you know, the material of the future, and nobody actually advised them and pushed them. Okay, think about how to use this, because there is a marketing, worldwide market need of it. So yeah, we can speak a lot, but I hope this is only first of the meeting between over this topic. As I mentioned, we need a dedicated fund, we need a venture building models, and I believe that very recent we will create at least 2-3 unicorns, because in the field of life sciences, the unicorns is actually a normal usual. Okay, so I hope today we managed to discover the possible scenario of how to ensure this development, and how to actually bring those ideas and those motivation that we are dealing every day connected to the life sciences and health. Of course, as a health and life science cluster, we will continue very hard to work over creation of such a venture build model. We want to implement and showing that this could be a solution and working one. And of course, I hope that let's think big. Let's all think big. I hope that many people will share our thoughts and will join us, participate, support us. Thank you again to our lovely guests. It was quite interesting. I hope that we will continue, of course, to discuss this topic. And it was fantastic for me being here with you. See you next month, and expecting a good feedback or proposition what we can do next. Thank you, Martin, for leading this meeting. It was, as I mentioned from the beginning, for us a huge chance to have you on board. So I wish you a very helpful and peaceful evening. See you next month.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Everyone. Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.